Today I wanted to react and do something. I want to do something different and react to some YouTube and TikTok videos talking about the monetary value that's really out of context in certain videos, and the impressions of people and their history behind every single watch and value related to the watch, okay? If you don't understand the value of a watch that has to do with its history, the branding, the retailing space, the way people are really hyped up about them, and you are outside of this industry, your perception is going to be very skewed and very flawed. And that's what I want to talk about today, which is something that, it's on my mind. And this whole video, the first video, is really funny. It has to do with Teddy Baldessar showing a person a Paul Newman. And let's dig in and let's see what it really looks like.
And they're trying to show off here with the 3 clocks in the middle of the clock. So, they're definitely gonna maybe jump up the price for that. $800? Maybe.
Sorry, I started laughing.
Maybe it's more.
That watch is
so funny.
$250,000.
$250,000 for
Yes.
that watch. That can't even be a conversation starter. Hey, nice watch. Thanks. It's $250,000.
Yeah, I'm gonna stop it here. It's really funny because you see someone who's really not knowledgeable about the Paul Newman, and she's being shown a Paul Newman that's quite rare. I've had a few. They're roughly around the 200, mid 200s, retail price, or even a bit higher depending on condition, depends on how clean the dial is, how clean the case is, if you have papers, box, and everything. As you all know, Paul Newman Rolexes are kind of the pinnacle of collecting in this industry, except if you're looking at the King, Submariner, or other things. But in general, the one accepted king of watches is always the Daytona, and the Paul Newman has always been something of a very high value in the collecting industry. This lady is, her reaction is really priceless. I always found it funny. I watched this video numerous times, and for me it's, again, out of context, that value thrown to a person who doesn't understand what a Paul Newman is, where it's coming from, how rare those watches are, the fact that they were unsold for a very long time. They're almost given as free watches when you would buy multiple watches from Rolex. It would be just a funny thing to see that today people who don't see those watches every day and they're being shown that, they're reacting the same as anyone would, because they're worth the price of a condo, or even more in certain areas, or the price of a very luxurious car, and you have it on the wrist. This watch, if you wear it in, I'd say, 99% or almost 100% of places where you go, people don't know what it is. It's not the watch that you will flex with, as she says, and yes, they're worth a lot of money. Yes, in certain circles they're very well and very highly regarded, but a person like her who doesn't know what a watch is, you could wear $1 million watch, $1 million Paul Newman Daytona in gold, or even the RCOs that are worth well over $500,000. There were quite a few videos about that as well, and people just don't know. If you wear a Submariner, which is really recognizable, or something that's really flashy, like an AP or something like that, people are going to be a lot more enticed to look at them. But a vintage Paul Newman looks like nothing. Therefore, it's not a flex watch, it's not a douche watch, and you have to respect a bit of the history behind it. And that's the ultimate out of context video for someone who doesn't know anything. And when we put it in perspective, it becomes a lot clearer of what it is, of how important the watch is and to the watch community. And I own one, and no one ever said, douchebag. It's not that type of watch at all. The most important thing about those vintage watches, which you have to understand, is that they are not your, I'd say, common watch. You're not going to own that watch as a first watch. You're not going to be collecting for the first year and you're going to have like 2 of those or 5 of those, unless you're a millionaire or a billionaire. It's more of a watch that's either inherited, and if you have the means to actually hold it, you're going to keep it. But most of people that ever inherit those very high value Paul Newmans, or might it be Pateks or something that's really valuable, well over $100,000. And most of the people that I know of that even inherited or that got as a gift watches that are very old, that are normally over $5, $10, $20,000, most of those people are gonna sell them, regardless of how valuable they are and how attached they are to the watch. They're mostly gonna sell them because they're not watch people. So you have to understand that that community of watch people revolving around those watches, they know the value. You don't need to tell someone, hey, this watch is worth X. They already know. They respect it. They respect what you're wearing. They're respecting the watch. But it has nothing to do with flexing. It's not the modern type of pieces that you see today. It's still a way of flexing, of saying, hey, I do have one, but it remains within a circle that's more of a circle of knowledge than a circle of normal people. Because if you tell even a doctor, hey, I'm wearing a watch on my wrist that's worth your whole year of salary, they're gonna find it a bit weird, you know. It's not because you're gonna look down on people, it's also respecting what it is and how this whole industry is. So it's more in depth than just the surface value or the perceived value of an object, okay? That's for...
You just got to Miami, need hotel rooms. Niggas tell you that they look.
Oh, you don't touch someone's watch, you mark. That's identical by going out to a man and touching their balls. You don't do that. He's wearing a Richard Mille RM2704.
Actually, I'm gonna agree here with Nico. Just don't touch people's watches. You know, if someone wants to show you their watch, they're gonna pull it off their wrist. They're gonna be like, hey, here, you want to have a look. And honestly, you're gonna show the watch, but also someone who doesn't know watches and someone who's really not aware of the value of your watch should simply not touch your watch, regardless of what it is. It's a sign of respect. It's a sign of how to interact with the watch collector or someone who owns a pride object. Just be careful. You know, be nice, be respectful of the people you're touching, or you want to touch. It's very important. When it comes to the value of the watch, you know, in this case, obviously it's something that's worth over $2 million US. It's, without any pun intended or anything, it's a bit touchy to be close to people that might be wearing very valuable watches or jewelry or anything. It's very important that the respect prevails anything else, because you never know what it is. You have to understand that sometimes watches that people might wear, they're inexpensive, but it's all a matter of respect at the end of the day. And out of context, someone would say, hey, he just touched his hand, but in this context, if you don't know, it's a very valuable watch. You know, sometimes people try to steal watches in parties, and, you know, they're quick with their fingers. So you have to be really respectful first and foremost, I'd say, when it comes to those.
Net worth? Watch. Tech billionaire and richest man on earth, Elon Musk, has a reported net worth of $199.8 billion. But even with that immense personal wealth, Elon's been spotted wearing some relatively affordable wristwatches. The first one being a Tag Heuer Carrera caliber 1887 chronograph SpaceX collaboration limited edition worth $6,000. And an Omega Seamaster Aquaterra, also worth around $6,000. At the time of filming, I think he has 8 kids though, so maybe he's saving up his money for child support. Nick Cannon's got him beat though.
Here you see something that's a bit contrary of what people might think, where someone who's the richest man in the world, Elon Musk, is actually wearing, you know, relatively affordable or more entry-level pieces than you might think. At that level, you have to understand that, yeah, if you see Elon Musk on the street, obviously you're gonna know what the guy is worth or what his companies are worth. You can look him up and you know that, you know, we're in the hundreds of billions of dollars. Therefore, the watch doesn't make the man and the man doesn't make the watch, okay? In terms of value, you know that you can wear something unaffordable. It doesn't mean that you have to show off your richness by your watch. What I always tell people is buy a watch that you like, buy a watch that you're gonna wear. Those are mostly not investments. Who makes money in all this industry? We do, okay? We're dealers, we're changing watches from one hand to another, we're making a little commission. That's how we make money. But you have to understand that someone who's that rich doesn't need to showcase a watch of extreme value, and that for me is something that should be humbling for a lot of people and show you that you don't need to be someone obnoxious about what you're wearing, who you are, or whatnot. From Elon Musk, you have something very commendable and very respectful, and this is it. It's really not wearing anything that's obnoxiously visible. You know who he is, you know what his value is. The second point, when you see the SpaceX collaboration within Elon Musk company with tag, it just means everything for him. And regardless of what the value of the watch really is, it's his baby on the wrist, you know, wearing it. It just means everything for him, more than, you know, the value that the watch might have on the secondary market. So it's very important for you to understand that a billionaire of this caliber doesn't really need to showcase anything else other than what he is and what he's all about, and that watch just is perfect for what he needs. All that being said, if you talk about the Paul Newman, for example, it's the whole story that goes behind and that relates to the watch and that vehiculates the idea and that transmits the whole message of what it really means and what it really is. Again, there's some pieces that are more in demand. That's maybe not one of them, but in general, when you're looking at really rare watches or something that has a name or that bears some kind of history, the history most of the time is worth more than the watch itself, and that's what makes it.
What's the most expensive watch you've bought, or that you currently own?
The most expensive watch I've ever bought and sold was a crystal Richard Mille Tourbillon, green sapphire.
And how much was that?
4.8 million.
4.8, and that's dollars, right?
Yes.
What's the most expensive watch you currently own or that you've sold?
The 5740. Still up there. It's probably one of my favorites.
And how much was that?
I'm gonna stop it there. So you have Roman Scharf being asked what's the best or what's the most valuable watch he ever sold, and that was around $5 million, which is very, very impressive. But again, you have to understand those are not first-time buyers, okay? If you put it out of context, it seems like the world to most of us, you know, $5 million US is a lot of money. But for certain people of a certain net worth, I'd say they're able to purchase those watches, and most of the time you're never going to see them, even though it's something that's pretty private. All the bigger deals myself that I did were really relatively private. No one really knows about them. It's really interesting to actually do a deal. It's very interesting to actually take a flight, deliver a watch, and it's done. You know, it's a lot more interesting at that level of business. To keep it on the down low, I don't want to showcase my business. A lot of them are, you know, but at the same time, the people who buy those very, very expensive watches, they want to remain extremely private, and it's very important in this industry to remain private, as well as resellers or, you know, second-hand dealers, to keep that for ourselves. For the second watch, obviously it's someone that actually bought the watch most probably at retail, and then he talks about how much it might be worth on the secondary market. So again, it's a relative market value. The perceived value in this case is around $200,000 US for a 5740, but in reality it was maybe paid, you know, sub 100 or something like that. And the idea here is that it doesn't really matter the retail, okay? I see watches, here, I have one right here. We're talking about a Breitling Avenger carbon fiber chronograph. It does have the bill, the paper. If you see what it was paid, it was just paid roughly $11,000 Canadian funds, so roughly around 8,000 US if we're doing the conversion more or less. Again, the perceived value is the $11,000 as the retail, but the reality of the market is that this watch is worth roughly around half of its retail price. That's why if you're looking at those 5740s, 5711 Nautiluses, obviously the original retail price was much lower than what they command in the secondary market. So that's why you have to understand that the market is actually very, very fluctuating. Okay, you might have a unique piece. How do you price a watch that's, you know, unique? There's one of them in the world. How do you price that? Well, you know, in that very high level of the market, you have to find the right buyer. And sometimes the watch might have been worth $500,000, and then all of a sudden it's worth double, triple, quadruple because someone really wants it. And the inverse can be very true as well. You know, something that could be worth a a lot of money when you purchased it and could be worth almost nothing when you try to resell it. Therefore, you have to do a lot of research, you have to do your due diligence, you have to deal with trusted dealers. Again, if we sell you a watch today that's worth X amount, and in 6 months it's worth double, very good for you. I'm very happy. We're going to pay according to the new value of the piece. If the value divides by 2 in 6 months, a year, 5 years, sadly, we're going to have to pay according to the new value of that day or of the month or of the year. If we can kind of see where the market is going, sometimes we do a bit of a better buy and we kind of hope for the best, but it's not always the case. And most of the time, all those bigger watches are kind of flipped through within the same day or within the same week. No one can afford, as even bigger dealers like Roman Scharf, he's not going to sit on that piece, put in $4.5 million to make $300,000 and sit on it for like 6 months. No one does that. It's not feasible. As a business, you cannot just make a few percent and sit on stuff for that long. So the bigger the reward on those bigger pieces, but that's another story for another time. Okay, let's see another one here that was quite interesting. So here you see you have a constellation that's vintage. It's a small video. I just want to say, you know, a lot of people think that their watch is the most valuable watch for the money. There's a lot of good choices in the vintage world. You have Longines that have in-house movements from the 60s and the 50s. They're worth $500 or less in US dollars. And if you're looking at Longines, Omega, they were kind of on par in terms of design, in terms of quality. In this case, it's a constellation, but in this case, it's just regular constellation. So you don't have a pipe pan, you don't have anything like that. So roughly, you're going to look at a watch like this that has a bit of patina on the dial or speckles on the dial. You're looking at $1,000 to $250, $1,500. I'm gonna answer for him more or less. So you're looking in the, you know, sub $1,500 range, depending if it was serviced, the band that's on it, and the overall condition. If you have something with box papers for a vintage watch, which is a lot more rare, a similar watch could be worth over $2,000 US. If it's extremely clean, this one is just the regular watch that we see all the time, but it's something really cool to see, you know, and people have to realize that you don't need a lot of money to get into the luxury watch market. Again, luxury means whatever it means to you, you know. For you, $200 might mean the world. For other people, $200,000 might mean, you know, chump change. So it's very, very different from a person to another. And I do agree that you have to do a lot of research according to your own budget. And that's one of them that I always tell people: if you want something entry level, buy a Tudor, buy a Seiko. One of those Seamaster constellations from Omega are amazing. And there's so many other choices from lesser known brands, but they have just as good movements and just as good quality. The only thing, they're a lot harder to find in really good condition, and most of the time they don't have an in-house movement. They're gonna have an ETA movement or something similar from the time. That's gonna be a bit more tricky if you have dials or parts replaced to restore them, just because they were not as common as Omega or Longines are. But overall, super cool watch. I'd say if you want to buy something entry level in a good price, that's a good one.
Hey, I'm going in the street, I'm not negotiate, but I'm gonna ask people how much do they think this watch costs. This one is the Blue Z, my favorite one. How much do you think this watch costs?
This one, it's not original, but I think maybe like...
You don't think it's original?
Yeah, I think it's not original. I have one like Datejust 44 millimeters. I think this one...
I'm just gonna stop it here really quickly, okay? There are so many things wrong. If you don't know what you're talking about, just don't talk. The fact that the kid just says, I don't think it's original, and he has a Datejust 44 millimeters, that just tells you how little the person knows. I can tell just at a glance that the watch is correct. Okay, and it's a 16613. It's most probably, I didn't see if it has lug holes or not, but it's been made since 1980 $889 up to 2011, more or less. And this is a very classic bluesy. They made it for roughly around 20 years, as I said. And depending on condition, box papers, it's a very good watch to buy if you're into the two-tone Rolexes. It's one of the most classic and most recognizable Submariners in the two-tone that they ever made. And honestly, we're gonna keep on going, but we'll see how much or how little people know about watches. And just out of context, if you don't know, it's always better to ask. Before anything being asked to me or whatever, I would ask more questions on my side. I would answer more with a question than actually with a real value. It's very important to actually be, question yourself or question what you're being asked before you can give an appropriate answer, because you can give prices, you can give whatever without knowing, and that's very bad in this industry because a lot of people speak without much knowledge, and that's the primordial idea when you do business. Okay, so it's very, very important to know what you're talking about. Obviously, I'm not expecting them, they're not in the business, but I would personally ask more questions before just answering. Okay, let's keep looking.
It's like maybe 200.
200?
Like it's too light for a Rolex.
It's too light for Rolex?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the colors, I agree with him, is a little bit lighter than the regular Rolex. I'll give just maybe 800.
How much do you think this watch costs?
$45. Sophie, what do you think?
It's a Rolex.
A Rolex. It's a Rolex.
Oh, yeah.
I'm gonna guess 400 plus. I don't know.
So this watch costs $11.
$11?
No.
Oh, girl, I was like, what? Okay.
¿Cuánto vale?
3,000?
Yes.
Yes.
¿Centamio?
Yes.
Okay. ¿Por qué tres?
Porque o valor pela marca.
Pela marca. Para marca? 11000.
How much you...
25,000?
Tell me another price.
35?
35.
25. He said 25.
25?
I said 35.
Ah, okay.
Who's wrong, who's right?
Okay, this watch costs 11,000.
Yeah. When I wake up in the night, I swear to my God, I'll watch your video.
Really? Thank you so much. I appreciate
I know all your videos.
Thank you.
What you see here is basically a bunch of people that have mixed ideas of what the Rolex should be worth. You have the lady who doesn't know much or who doesn't want to know much about watches, and she says $45. Then you have the other extreme where you have someone saying 45,000. It's 1,000 times the value. So the perceived image of a watch, especially out of the context, out of the fact that those people don't know or don't look for those watches, you might expect, hey, I want a Rolex. They know that Rolex is expensive, or they know that the brand is very expensive. But in general, you're not expecting people to just hand you a watch and you touch it and you feel it, and you don't expect that to be the real deal. So that's why I think some people here might have thought it's a fake one, or it's kind of a cheaply made watch. But you have to realize there's an evolution between the 1950s and today's Rolexes, where in the 50s it was more of a tool watch in most cases. It was more of a daily watch. They're not as heavy. The links of the bracelet were folded, they were riveted, they were, hollow depending on the era, depending on the year. And that's why sometimes you have that perceived value with the weight, the perceived value with how flashy it is. And a lot of people have higher expectations because they see high prices, so they think that the watch should be worth so much more. But in reality, okay, before buying a watch, you always have to do your due diligence again and again and again. Reading upon them, looking on different platforms, talking to dealers, calling people, seeing if I have a watch that interests you and you're looking for the best price, am I going to give you the best price? I will try to do my very, very best. But again, a lot of dealers are looking for those people who don't know what they're doing, who don't know the value of a watch, and you might pay $20,000 for a watch that's really worth 12, So that's very, very important right now in the market to do your research. If you want to buy a $50 watch, you have a lot of great choices in Timex. For a bit more, you're going to go into the G-Shocks. You're gonna have so many citizen watches, so many watches out there that are really affordable. They're gonna do a very good job for the lower price. If you're looking for a Rolex, you're looking for a Jaeger, you're looking for a Patek Philippe, for an Omega, anything else, contact your local dealers, contact a local second-hand dealer that might be able to help you. If they're trying to push a sell on you at the first time you're going to see them, just walk away, tell them, look, I'm gonna think about it. That happened to me many times where people, they said, hey, I'm gonna think about it, and that's fine, you know, in quotations, because they really gotta do their due diligence. I know they're not thinking, they really want to compare. That's fine, and that's what I always tell people. If you're not ready mentally to buy a watch, I'm not gonna push a sell on you. And that's what a normal salesman should do. If they're pushing a sell on you, it means that most of the time they're not going to let you either time to think about it and to do your research basically at the end of the day. So you're going to end up overpaying or buying something that's not in the condition you expected it to be, if it's a vintage watch or something that's over 5-10 years old and it might have been polished a few times, might have been dropped, you know, some damage might have happened, it was repaired, maybe sometimes very poorly. If you don't have the trained eye, you might buy a lemon, and that's not what you want in this industry, you know, especially if it's your first watch. And that's the case for a lot of people here. What you see is that if you don't have the trained eye, you don't have the experience of dealing with watches, you might have dealers that might take advantage of your lack of knowledge and your lack of interest. So if you're just there to splurge some money, you might get burned very easily. I think I kind of covered the videos I wanted to do. I just watched them really quickly before, you know, and for me it's kind of shocking to see all that being portrayed, you know, and always talking about value, always talking about money. But at the end of the day, the value is when you know about the watch. Okay, when you have the knowledge, then your portrayed image and your portrayed value of the piece or anything that you're going to buy is going to be different. Okay, it's not because the watch or the watch market is growing up in value. It's not because Rolex is just raising the value of their pieces. It's just, it doesn't make any sense that the same watch from last year is raised in value by another 10% the year after. It doesn't cost them more to produce, you know, it's just your value perception that goes up. There you're saying, hey, they're going up in value, so I'm paying more, so I'm getting more for my money. It's not at all the case, okay? Same thing with every other brand out there. It doesn't mean that a Hublot is gonna be very expensive, that you have the quality of a very high-end watch. You're gonna have a Salita movement. I talked about that in the past. There's trash and there's good stuff in the industry, and you have to distinguish that between what you're spending and what you're getting for your money. Okay, all that being said, I hope you liked the video. I don't want to say anything bad about anyone. I'm just saying it's all about the image of this whole industry, and you have to be your own judge. The image you have of a brand and of a company is yours to be made. You have to understand what the market is, what we portray as a value, what we give as a value as dealers, okay? Certain dealers are very honest, certain other ones are just trying to sell you a story. You're not a chick magnet because you're wearing a very expensive watch, and you're not going to be attracting more deals in your business because you're wearing a high-end watch. It's not what you're going to get out of it, but in reality, it's what you perceive it for yourself, and that's the most important thing. Thank you guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. Have a great week, and I'll